Will you pray with me? Open us up, Holy One, to your Spirit this morning, that we might experience you in a new way. Open our minds, our hearts, our spirits, that we too might be transformed. In Christ's name, amen. As Jean said, it's a familiar story. We do. We have this scripture passage, and this is Transfiguration Sunday. So this is something we address every year, right before Lent, with the hopes maybe of being transformed, changed ourselves. Possibly it's the reminder of who Jesus is and what is ahead. I don't know why we have it every year, but we do. And so it's a familiar one, and maybe one that becomes possibly a little ho-hum, or maybe it's something that we kind of like never really get. It's filled with symbols. So as we go through the story, imagine what it might have been like for Peter, James, and John. 3 young Jewish men who would have understood the symbols. So it's been a busy time. Jesus has been preaching, he's been teaching, he's been healing. The crowds are constant. In fact, he's gotten enough attention that religious leaders are coming to him and trying to trap him. Now, imagine the emotional wherewithal it takes to have to kind of like endure that. Oh no, here they come again. And so, I'm sure Jesus had to be tired. And then he has this group of close friends who are hanging out with him. And, you know, once you start to get to know someone, you hang out together and you're doing stuff day after day, but you have different perspectives on things. You know, the pettiness can come up, and so you've got these disciples who are sometimes picking at each other. They're saying to Jesus, "What did you mean?" Jesus is like, "Weren't you listening? Weren't you paying attention?" They're caught up in their own ways of doing things, and surely Jesus had to be tired. And Jesus did what we read he often did. He decided it was time to get away. To be able to get away and have a time of renewal. Only this time, he took 3 of these friends with him. 3 of these followers. Peter, James, and John. Now, we don't know a whole lot of the detail, but it's quite possible that they didn't get up in the morning and say, "Let's go." That it was after a long day, again, of dealing with the crowds. It says after 6 days, but you know, given the stories of Jesus' life, we can imagine that life continued to be busy and hectic. And so, at the end of this long day, Jesus is saying, "Hey, come with me. Let's go to the mountain." The mountain. Whoa, okay. But we know what happens on mountains, because that's kind of the realm of God. Whether we go back to the giving of the Torah, of the instruction, when Moses went up, or other times and places, Peter, James, and John would have known the symbolism of going to the mountain. Because that would be where God would reside. And there is danger in that. Because to be in the presence of God could be that one would survive that. But they know Jesus. They've been following him, and they trust him, and they go with him. And so they go up the mountain. I'm sure they were exhausted. In Luke, it even mentions that they were half asleep. So they go up there, and again, maybe reading a little bit in, Jesus may have stepped aside from them a little bit, as he did at other occasions and to pray. And all of a sudden, things started to change. His face experienced a transformation that could only best be described as becoming like light. His clothing began to change so that there didn't seem to be substance to them, but they were more like light. Now, have you ever kind of like reached for light? Have you grasped, you know, if you play with cats and they're trying to find that piece of light? And so what these men were watching was something that went from physical to possibly not quite physical. Marcus Borg talks about how Jesus was one who went between the physical world and the spirit world. And that barrier was not quite as tangible for him. And in fact, Marcus Borg suggests that Jesus isn't the only one who actually would be open to the spirit world. But clearly, Jesus was open to the spirit world. And as these disciples were watching this change in him, they also see that there are two others with him. And how they recognize them, I don't know, but they recognized them as Moses and Elijah. Again, the symbolism of that. For Moses was the great prophet par excellence, as one scholar put it. He was the one who actually encountered the presence of God and lived. And brought to them their beloved Torah of instructions for life. Oftentimes, we think that the law was only about some kind of legal document. But in reality, it was about how to live life more fully, more vibrantly, and in ways that ensure that those who are poor are taken care of, that justice is done. It was the laws that were developed and understood from study of the Torah to be able to understand that people needed to be taken care of, because not everyone has equal opportunity. Now, I think about the farmers who were encouraged to not keep going back and gathering the grain until they've got every last bit, but to leave some behind. Remember the story of Ruth? That she and those who did not have resources would be able to live. Moses and the law that they were raised on and that they cherished. And then there was Elijah, representing the prophets. The ones who kept calling them back to saying, hey, you may be following the letter of the law, but it's the spirit. This is about bringing your whole self. It's not just that you can do this and worship God, but that the two are related. And Elijah, the forerunner of the Messiah. And I think about how at Passover, even today, there is a place at the table for the prophet Elijah. The role that Elijah played in holding out a hope for the future. And then there was Jesus, the one who they began to kind of like grasp this idea of maybe this really was the Messiah. It had just been a little bit before when Jesus said, yeah, you're the one. You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. You're the Messiah. And there were the three of them. They were talking together like they knew each other. Now, I do think it's possible that this wasn't the only time that Jesus had this experience. He only took the three of them as far as we know once. But how do we know that this wasn't Jesus' normal experience when he retreated for renewal? That he began to engage with this other world that just kind of, wow. And I'm a little jealous of them. I'm a little jealous that they had this experience. They encountered the glory of God in what they witnessed. They encountered something beyond what they could wrap their heads around. Because this wasn't something that they could necessarily explain. Now, even today, we try to figure out, well, did this literally happen? You know, I don't know. I kind of believe it did. Because I believe there's something more than the physical. I believe there's something more to our existence, and that we are limited by not being open to God's Spirit in more ways. So maybe it was allegorical, or maybe it was a literal event that happened. But what I do know is it was about transformation, and it was about God's glory. And it was about being in the presence of that which is holy. And those three bumbling guys got to be there for it. And I think about how there are times when I just kind of like feel stuck. I feel like I'm in a rut. I feel like, okay, where's the light? And I look at this and I think, I'd like a little bit of that. I need that glory. I need that sense of renewal, of something that will touch me inside and refresh my soul. Something that gives me a spark again. Something that gives me a hope in the midst of everything that seems to be going around. I mean, every day I grab my iTouch. Every morning and I look at the news. And it's kind of like, what more? No, what's going to happen next in Wisconsin? How many people are going to lose their jobs? And for what? What gets eroded in how we look at treating people? What's happening in the Middle East? I mean, look at this movement, this desire for democracy, and it's like fires are spontaneously combusting. But where is it going to lead? Is there going to be peace, or is it going to be a further eruption of conflict? We don't know. And so there's hope, but there's a sense of uncertainty as well. There are conflicts all over the world. And then here we are in a state of 14% unemployment. And for those of us who still have jobs, how fortunate we are. And what are we willing to do to keep our jobs? What are we willing to do? Are we still going to work for making sure it stays a 40-hour week? Now, not that anyone has suggested it not be a 40-hour work week, but the sense of how do we care for all? And how do we care for all in a time that carries with it such uncertainty? Just doesn't grab it, because it doesn't grab the emotion of it. It doesn't grab the fear of it. Well, I was talking with a friend on Friday, and we were talking about how these are really interesting times, but they're fearful times as well. And what's ahead, we don't know, but here we are in the midst of it. And I believe that was also true in Jesus' time, that it was a time of political turmoil, that the people of Israel were living under triple taxation. They were being taxed to death. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But their taxation came from the Romans who controlled their land, and how they didn't have the freedom to come and go as they wanted. If a Roman soldier said, "Here, carry my pack," they had to do it. No, desire to be able to work and earn, the pressures that come with that. And in the midst of that, Jesus went up a mountain and he took 3 friends with him, and they experienced some of that glory. And I want some of that now. Doesn't your heart just yearn for the presence of God in the midst of all of this? A spirit that touches us and renews us and gives us a sense of hope, a sense of holy, a sense of there's something more. That's what they got to experience. But you know what? They couldn't stay there. Now, Peter was eager to stay there. He said, hey, I've got this idea. How about I construct these, I'll construct 3 tents. Okay, I'll set up 3 tents. Well, you know, one for Jesus, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Well, those tents, what he was talking about were tabernacles. And tabernacles were the places where God resided. They were places where you could come and experience the holy. And somehow to me it just seems sacrilegious that Peter would somehow kind of like say, okay, let's do this and let's contain this spirit and let's stay here. And sure enough, there was an immediate response. And that fear maybe they had of going up the mountain, that was that booming voice and that just flattened them to the ground in fear of saying, hey, this is my son who I love. Listen to him. Now, how many times had Jesus already said, hey, aren't you paying attention? I don't think this was a new message, because they've been wandering around following Jesus, they've been listening to his teachings, and they'd be asking him questions. Jesus is like, were you there? And it was yet one more reminder, listen to him. Listen to him later when he says, yes, what the prophets taught about the law, it can be distilled even more. It's not just living in your heart, but it can be reduced to this idea that if you love God, and you love those around you, all of them, you have fulfilled the law. Listen to him. Be renewed by this time away, but it is time to go down from the mountain. And that's the thing about experiencing the holy. Sometimes it may be fleeting, and yet it changes us. It changes us because we have experienced something that is far beyond who we are. And we take that with us. Maybe others see it and maybe they don't. But we've had that experience and it changes us. Grasping for that glory gives us something new, something to hold on to, even in the darkest of days. Because that spirit doesn't stay in those tabernacles, in those tents. That spirit comes along with us. That spirit goes on ahead of us to prepare the way. That spirit surrounds us and holds us up. At times we're not even aware of it. Because we do worship a still speaking God. One who still desires to touch us, to walk with us, to be with us down in the muck and the snow and the mud, as well as on the mountaintop. Please, look for the mountaintop. Find that mountaintop. And bring that back down into the valley. And share with those around you who may not have been able to get there. surely, surely is with us in all that we experience. Will you pray with me? Open us up, Holy One, to what is beyond what we can imagine. Open us up to a sense of your Spirit, that we might find you and experience you even in the places we least expect it. Renew us